Is there a Bhagavad Gita here? So, thank you for all coming today to participate in our kirtan. Take the darshan of Shri Radha Gopi Vallabha and to give me the opportunity to be with you and to render some service. I'm grateful for this opportunity. It's nice to see how many of you have come today. I'm sure there are other things you could do on New Year's Day, but this seems like as good as any other event to take part in to celebrate the New Year. Hopefully it's better. This is, okay, is this? It's just a little cranky. Hare Krishna. Anybody here for the first time? Just thought I'd ask. Yes? We have some people here for the first time. Oh. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Is it first time in Boston Temple or first time at a Hare Krishna temple? The Boston Temple. Okay. First time at Hare Krishna temple. Okay. Also, first time at Hare Krishna temple. Okay. I generally don't ask that question when I'm here, but I'm glad I asked today. Have we lost the microphone again?
Yeah, it's a little flimsy. Yeah, sorry, Maharaj.
It's okay. I'm used to it.
Yeah.
I live mostly in Russia and in Ukraine, and things don't work usually there so well. So, okay. Well, what should we read then? Maybe we should read. I was reading this morning from the introduction of Bhagavad Gita. Maybe we could read from there. It's may sound introductory, but Prabhupada told us anywhere you lick on the sweet ball doesn't make any difference, it's just as sweet. Similarly, wherever there are topics of Krishna, and especially as presented by Srila Prabhupada, it will always be relevant to any sincere person, introspective person, who's trying to understand spiritual life. We were speaking on this topic this morning. We gave a class in Hartford, Connecticut, and we were speaking from a verse that they were on there today, and the subject was about the difference between the impersonal aspect of the Supreme Lord and the personal aspect, and how the verse went on to explain, and commentary by Srila Prabhupada, how the personal aspect of the Lord is complete, the most complete understanding of the Supreme, whereas the impersonal aspect and the localized feature of the Lord is the absolute truth. But nonetheless, it is not complete. And Srila Prabhupada and the verse also explained that to be engaged completely in spiritual life, 10%, fully simply means to understand our relationship with Krishna. And what is the relationship with Krishna, and how to act according to that relationship. In Sanskrit, this is called sambandha, avideya, and prayojana. Sambandha is to know the relationship between the Supreme Lord, the living entity, and the material nature. And avideya means how to act according to that relationship. And prayojana means the perfection of having established a complete relationship with the Supreme. So, spiritual topics are relevant to everyone, and Prabhupada quoted the verse in this morning's commentary, Aham bija patapita, where Krishna says, I am the seed-giving father of all living beings. And therefore, if he is the seed-giving father of all living beings, that means that all living beings have a relationship. And having understood that relationship, the pursuit or spiritual life means how to act according to that relationship. And when one establishes that connection and relationship, then Prabhupada was also speaking that Aruya Krishnena Parampadam Tata, where he said, for those who may be on the platform of impersonal realization, who may have detached themselves from the physical realm, and they may have detached themselves from the world of duality, and they've come to the platform of Brahmabhuta, Prasamatma. Brahmabhuta means self-realized, meaning on the spiritual platform. Prasanatma means self-satisfied. And then na sochati, na kankshati. On that Brahmabhuta platform, when one is neither hankering for material things, nor lamenting for things which come, which are not expected. And then in that verse in the Bhagavad Gita, it states that when one comes to that consciousness, Brahmabhuta, then he can begin devotional service, because he will no longer be distracted by the physical realm, be distracted by the dualities of the material world. Liberated, but complete liberation means not simply to detach oneself from the physical world and subtle body, but complete liberation is only achieved when one firmly understands, okay, now that I'm detached from the physical, subtle world, what do I do? This is when life really begins. Before that, it's just simply cultivating detachment. But life really begins when one understands, now, what do I do eternally, spiritually? And it begins when one engages in service to the Supreme Lord. And then, of course, by being engaged in service freed from material motivations, because one is detached. Therefore, material motivations are no longer binding us to this world. But there still is one more danger of a material motivation. And that danger is to think oneself one with the Supreme. Or that the danger is to enjoy liberation, enjoy being freed from entanglement. And therefore we oftentimes quote that verse, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Atayeva Shanta Bhakti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashanta. Now Krishna Bhakta, a devotee of Lord Krishna, he's Nishkama, he's freed from material desires. He's desireless. There's no desires, material. Sakali Ashanta, therefore he can be peaceful. Whereas those who are bhukti, those who still want some enjoyment of this world, those who are mukti, those who simply want to be liberated from the entanglement of this world, and siddhi, those who want some mystic yogic perfections as a result of their austerities and penances. Bhukti, mukti, siddhi, kami. Kami means lust. Kama comes from the word kama, which is lust. They still have lusty desires. Sakali, ashanta. Therefore they can't be peaceful because there's no final goal for them. There's no final shelter, resting place for the wandering mind. Because as long as there's selfish desires, it means they're unfulfilled. And as long as there's unfulfilled desires, sakali ashanta. One can't be peaceful. So therefore, the essence of bhakti is to understand how to get the complete fulfillment of desires. All desires. This is the transcendental platform from which one achieves his relationship with the Supreme, and he establishes his connection, and he begins to know the personal relationship that exists between, when Krishna says, Aham bija pratapita, I'm the seed-giving father of all living beings, then one begins to realize that, hey, there's a connection. And Krishna says, I'm eternal. In that for the Supreme Lord, he's beginningless, he has no beginning, he has no end, he has a form of eternal fresh youth. And therefore, if Krishna is beginningless and has no end, the living being part and parcel of Krishna, is also beginningless and has no end. What to do? How to deal with that? How to deal with it? Prabhupada explains in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he says sometimes when people hear about the eternality of the soul, they become anxious. They think, oh no, it means I have to live like this forever? They don't know. They don't know what eternal life is. It's one of the underlying frustrations of understanding I'm eternal. And when I don't know, what do I do eternally? They have no conception. No conception. And Krishna very clearly explains that the only way you can have a conception, atapi te deva padam bhaja dvaya prasada lisanugrihit evi. Everyone's heard this word prasad before, right? Prasada. What does prasada mean? It's just mercy. Atapi te deva padam bhaja dvaya prasada lisanugrihit evi. Unless one gets a drop of mercy, we may call that mercy Mahaprasad, but prasada also manifests in other forms. Krishna's mercy. Unless one gets that drop of mercy from Krishna's lotus feet, one will never be able to understand his personality. Even if one engages in speculation. In fact, Prabhupada was saying this morning, he says, those who theoretically discuss the absolute truth, discussing just simply theoretically, like mental speculation means there's a sincere endeavor to want to know what is the truth, but one doesn't really know. So therefore one engages in the pursuit of trying to understand. Somebody is seriously looking for a solution to the problems of life. So, I forgot what I was saying. Can someone help me?
About the pursuit, one who's seriously pursuing.
Thank you. Thank you. That helps. I actually get distracted from the screaming of a child. I usually, when I travel, I stay with many families and homes and they have children. And I can really, I can really be very tolerant generally. But sometimes I wonder how the parents do it. And because I've never been one. And what to speak of, Krishna says, I am the seed-giving father of all living beings. Imagine all the screams Krishna has to listen to. Prabhupada even says, he gives the example, he gives the analogy. He gives the analogy that one of the aspects, there's the Brahman aspect and there's the Paramatma aspect. The Paramatma aspect is the aspect of the Lord within the heart, who is the witness and sanction. Because not a blade of grass can move without the will of the Lord. Therefore, as the Lord situated within the heart of all living beings, He's witnessing the desire of all the living beings, and whatever they persistently pursue, even to the point of screaming, I want it, I want it, I want it, then He gives His sanction. Right. So He has to listen to a lot of screaming, essentially, because the living entity has so many desires and can't do anything without the sanction of the Lord. Nothing. Everything has to be sanctioned by Him because He's the Supreme Controller. So He gives us the sanction to act according to our independent desires. And He gives the example, just like sometimes a child may be very persistent and scream, I want it, I want it, I want it. So the parent may say, oh, okay. You can take it, right? So the child may say, just see, my father wanted me to have this. And some people may think, oh, Krishna gave it to me, therefore. But it's because of our persistent screaming, I want it, I want it, and want it. So Krishna said, okay, you want it, you can have it. But you don't necessarily get happiness because now you've got it. In fact, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Lord says, when my devotee engages in my devotional service, and at the same time, he wants the opulence of material enjoyment, he's like a fool who willingly gives up nectar to drink poison. He said, why should I give this fool material prosperity? Instead, I shall induce him to take shelter of my lotus feet and make him forget. And then he says that when my devotee engages in my devotional service, but at the same time he wants these fulfillment of these desires, I'll fulfill them, but in such a way that he won't come back and ask for them again. That's Krishna's kindness. Krishna's kindness. He makes us understand that you can have it, but just because you have it doesn't mean you're going to get all that bliss that you're anticipating you would get from obtaining it. It's temporary. And because it's temporary, it will have to lead eventually at some due course of time for that eternal soul. It will have to lead to some point of frustration when the loss is experienced, or the change is experienced, or the unexpected comes. Like the example we've given it before in the past many times, I like the analogy. And Bhagavatam that gives the example of the person who has a dream at night of something wonderful or something very horrible. So when the person has a very nice dream at night, right, and then he wakes up, he's very sad. But if he has a bad dream at night and he wakes up, he's very happy. So, but both the happiness and the sadness is experienced has no connection with reality. It's connected to a dream. No connection with reality. So that's the night dream. And then there's the daydream. When persons daydream of what they would like to have, and what they would like to avoid. Right? The daydream is, again, we live in the anticipation of the happiness of the fulfillment, the expectation of the fulfillment of our dream. And Krishna allows the living being to have his desires fulfilled. But the permanence of the happiness derived from such contact with a temporary object fully satisfy the self. So Krishna gives sanction, and he bears witness. And both by his sanction and witnessing, he gives the living entity the freedom to choose his destiny, his fate. But he says, but those who want to come to me, they can come to me. And to those who always endeavor, engaging in my devotional service, he said, not only will they come, he says, but I'll give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. Because I'm in their heart. And out of compassion for them, I am whom dwelling within their hearts, I will destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Dissipates the illusion. That is Krishna. And that's the relationship that every living being needs to pursue in order to be engaged in spiritual life. Complete spiritual life. Spiritual life, as we said, begins when one tries to understand the difference between the body and the soul, but then one has to go beyond that. And that is what the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada speaks about in his introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, where he speaks about how everything ultimately leads to devotional service to Krishna. In fact, this morning I quoted a verse spoken by Devahuti, and she was saying that anyone whose work does not raise one to religious activity, and anyone who is engaged in religious ritualistic performances that doesn't elevate him to the platform of renunciation, and anyone who is situated in renunciation that doesn't lead to devotional service to Krishna is a dead body, although breathing. Makes it very clear what the goal is, right? A dead body, although breathing, means that there's really no life, because spiritual life means real life begins on the platform of bhakti or devotion. That's when life begins, right? Just like sometimes we give this analogy. It's a very basic analogy that helps us to understand a little bit about the word life. Many times you read about in Srila Prabhupada's books about the necessities of life. Or just the other day, we were singing, where was it? No, it wasn't Phoenix, excuse me. I've been in a lot of places the last few weeks. I lose track. We were singing Bhaja Huremana, Sri Nandanandana. And Govinda Das says, E dana jovana putra parijana itiki achi paratitire kamala dala jala jivana talamala bhajahum hari parinitire. He says, E dana jovana, wealth, youth, wife, family. What is there in it? Just as a drop appears on a lotus leaf, such as this life. Therefore, let me take up the worship of Shri Hari, which is life's only necessity. Shri Hari, the worship of the Supreme Lord in devotion. So, we oftentimes speak about necessities of life, and Srila Prabhupada also refers to in many places the necessity of life. But usually when we hear that term, we usually think in terms of food, or shelter, clothing, or water, air. It's usual immediate response when we think of necessities of life. But actually these aren't necessities of life. Life has a different necessity. These are necessities of maintaining life in the body. That's all. But life has its own necessity. separate from maintaining life in the body, because life goes on after the body. So life also has another necessity, besides air, water, food, sunlight. So necessities of life, what are those? What is life's real necessity? No, the necessity of life is to understand one's relationship with Krishna. That is life's necessity. So, this is spiritual life. And spiritual life is not just simply the negation of material, but it means positive engagement. What is the positive engagement? What to do? Now that I've heard, I theoretically understand I'm not this body, or at least I've come to the conclusion that there's a lot of suffering to be experienced from this body. What do I do with it? How do I transcend it? And Prabhupada this morning was explaining that, and we were also speaking about this topic, that although Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, to become self-satisfied and to become detached physically, is a state that one can begin devotional service, the point is that for one who has the opportunity to make contact with devotional service by the mercy of a devotee, then he doesn't have to wait for Brahma Bhuta to begin his devotional service. Because as soon as we hear Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Nasochati Nakankshati, Brahma Bhuta means self-satisfied, Brahman realized, no hankering, no lamentation. In that state, one can begin devotional service. What? What? What does that mean? I have to wait before I begin devotional service to Brahma Bhuta? No. One can begin devotional service immediately, as soon as he comes in contact with a devotee. And then we were discussing how Lord Chaitanya himself, who is Krishna himself, he appeared primarily for this reason, to make bhakti accessible. How to make bhakti accessible? He said, I have to come as a devotee. Because it's the devotee that makes bhakti accessible. Why does the devotee make bhakti accessible? Because the devotee doesn't speak simply theoretically. When Krishna says, Sarvadhamam purityaja mamekam sharanam vraja, it's theoretical. Theoretically, he's telling us to surrender to him. But when Lord Chaitanya comes, he teaches by his example. It's no longer theoretical. Now you see for yourself what is devotion to Krishna. It goes beyond theory. It becomes understood, experienced. One comes in contact. Bhakti becomes accessible by the devotee. Therefore, the Lord appeared, although he was Krishna himself, he appeared as a devotee to make bhakti accessible. If he came as Krishna, how would he have made it accessible? Therefore, he had to come as a devotee to make it accessible. So anyone who would see him absorbed chanting Krishna's name. Although he was Krishna himself, he absorbed in the mood of a devotee, and he taught, Manmana bhava mad bhakta mad yajimam namaskuru. What does Krishna say? Manmana bhava mad bhakta. Krishna says, you should always think of me. You should always worship me. You should always offer your homages unto me. Surely you will come to me. So Krishna says that to Arjuna. He says it to us in Bhagavad Gita. Yes, we should do it. But it's theoretical. It's theoretical. But when the devotee comes and shows Manmana bhava mad bhakta, when he shows his mind is always absorbed in thoughts of Krishna, he's always speaking about Krishna, he's always worshipping Krishna, then it becomes accessible. One can see, yes, this is what bhakti is. We were speaking about this last night. Last night? Where was I? Last night. Huh? I was in poem program at Hartford, that's right. Yes, we were speaking about how Prabhupada, last night, how Prabhupada made bhakti accessible. In fact, I like to tell this story. It's a story. I'll tell it about experience I had many years ago, maybe 20 years ago. I was invited to Kripalu Ashram in Western Massachusetts. And the guru, his name was Yogi Amrit Desai. Trying to remember his name. And he had met Prabhupada. And he was actually very favorably disposed to Prabhupada. And I was invited to come. I was told by his students that, please come, bring your devotees and have kirtan. We would like to have kirtan with all of you. But we're told, but no lecture, okay? Just kirtan. So we thought it was a good opportunity. Anyways, it was not. It was a big ashram. And so a group of us went there. And when we arrived, they were having arti. And then they invited us to begin to lead the kirtan. And then we had a very wonderful kirtan. They were very enthusiastic. They really liked to chant and dance. And then Yogi Amrit Desai entered in during the middle of the kirtan. And he kind of walked in and sat sort of like in a detached way from what was going around. He wanted his followers to experience, but he was sort of like removed from the whole experience and was just sitting and watching them. Was anybody here was with me at that time? No? I'm trying to remember who was with P.R. Mohan, I think, was there. And then one devotee went over and held out his hand and said, so he was resisting a little bit because he was trying to maintain an air of, well, this is for them but not for me. But then finally he came into the kirtan, and then he started swirling around, chanting and dancing, hands in the air, and it went on for about another half hour. And then he sat down, he looked at me, he said, okay, go ahead, talk. That's not the point, though. That's not the point. The point is that I remembered the conversation that he had with Prabhupada. It might have been 1970. It was in Bombay, 75, 76 maybe. And one of the things, he wasn't challenging Prabhupada, but he was saying, how is it possible that you can give bhakti to others? He said, how is it possible that they can actually take up the process and strictly follow these principles of spiritual life? He says, I can't do it. I can't do it. And he was kind of indicating that Prabhupada it was doing something very, very wonderful. But it was, for him, it was sort of like unbelievable that he could do something like that. So I spoke about that. And he didn't let me speak long, but I spoke for about 20 minutes. And reflecting on our conversation, I was explaining how just as Lord Chaitanya made bhakti accessible, Srila Prabhupada, or the Acharya, comes to teach by his example, and by his example, he makes bhakti accessible. And by seeing the example, one gets strength to follow. Without the example, it's very difficult. But when one sees the example and sees the devotee who is self-satisfied, who's always engaged in Krishna service, who's peaceful in any condition of life, who's very determined to serve the Lord, who's never in any way victimized by duality, whose tongue, his body, his mind, he controls the urge to speak by always, just like Vacho Vegam, Manasakota Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Udara Pasta Vegam, it's stated in Upadeshamrita that the person who can control the urges to speak, the mind's demands, and the action of anger, and the tongue, belly, and genitals, he can make disciples all over the world. So with looking at Prabhupada, seeing how his mind, the urge to speak, was fully controlled. He would only speak about Krishna. He would never speak nonsense discussions. The mind's demands, perfectly calm in every circumstance. Stita Dimuni. Undisturbed in the face of adversity, in the face of difficulties. He was always determined. Anger, Prabhupada displayed anger, but his anger was never displayed because he was controlled by it. He displayed it because he had to teach, and how can you teach without becoming angry? Sometimes, especially if the father sees the child is doing something wrong, out of love, the father may become angry. Because otherwise, if the father just laughs, then the son will think, that's not fair. He's not serious. So he has to become angry. But he's not controlled by the anger. Because one who's controlled by the anger, right? It's called Viroda Yukta Krodha. Viroda Yukta Krodha means when the anger becomes so consuming, one becomes controlled by it, then one very seriously regrets what he does. Because Krishna says by contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops lust, anger, attachment, delusion, bewilderment of memory, intelligence is lost, and one falls into the material whirlpool. Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita. So anger is the result of attachment, unfulfilled desire. So Prabhupada, when he displayed anger, it was not because he was being controlled by anger, but he had full control of his anger. And therefore, he was utilizing it in Krishna's service to teach. Some people once saw Prabhupada become angry because they don't understand. They think, oh, he gets angry. But they don't understand. His anger is not controlled. Prabhupada even tells the story in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He tells the story of Narada Muni who accepted a snake as a disciple. Narada Muni can even accept snakes as disciples. He's a pretty transcendental personality. And he taught the snake to become a Vaishnava and to never bite anybody. So, the snake, being a very obedient disciple, would never bite, although the snake's tendency, its innate tendency, is definitely to bite. Snake by nature is very envious, and they'll bite. But he wouldn't bite. And the children, seeing that the snake wouldn't bite, they would come and throw stones and hit it with sticks and torture it. So the snake went back to Narada Muni and said, "What do I do?" He said, "You told me not to bite, so I don't bite." But all the children, they come and they just throw stones and beat up with sticks. And Narada instructed them and said, actually, when they come, raise your hoods as if they'll bite, as if you're going to bite them, but don't bite. So Prabhupada says, so therefore sometimes a devotee, he has to become angry for Krishna's service. But he doesn't. He's not controlled by the anger. So Rupa Goswami says, for one who has control of the mind, the urge to speak, actions of anger, who can control the tongue, the belly, genitals, then such a person who's conquered himself, he can control others. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that this is the characteristic of a sadhaka. First he controls himself and then he controls the world. So he controls himself, and how does he control the world? Because the world can't control him, because he's controlled himself. He cannot be allured by any allurements of this world, because if you are allured and you're tempted by the illusory energy, you will be controlled. But one who controls himself, so many allurements may be there, but the material world cannot control him. Therefore, he controls the world. So, Prabhupada taught us. We had that example. We could see, here's a person. It makes bhakti accessible, not only because he's always engaged in devotional service, but he teaches by his example how to live and be happy. It's always serving Krishna. And that example is what makes bhakti accessible. And we were also speaking. I was reflecting. I might have mentioned this last time I was here, that I was reflecting on Srila Prabhupada in the early days when he was first came to America, and when his first followers were coming to him, who were all mostly hippies, and who had no interest whatsoever in accepting authority. And Prabhupada, here he was in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and all the people that were coming were people who were coming from the hippie culture, who were really not interested in accepting any kind of authority. And Prabhupada was presenting the highest authority. Kind of coming in from some far-off place and entering into this place. And what attracted people was, of course, Prabhupada was a genuine devotee, pure devotee of the Lord. But when people saw his example and saw how genuine he was, it was very compelling. They just wanted to do something to help him. And that's how Prabhupada engaged so many people in Krishna's service, because he was genuine. He was the real thing. It's so rare to find the real thing in Kali Yuga. It's so rare to find somebody who's the real thing, who walks his talk, who speaks always about Krishna, who does everything for Krishna, who's satisfied serving Krishna, and he walks his talk, and he's like, you can't find. It's like very disarming. Very disarming. What do? You have to do something to serve them. And therefore, Prabhupada, being Krishna's ambassador and Krishna's transparent medium, he accepted their service in his detached way from his own selfish purposes, but in his attached way to want to do everything for Krishna. And therefore, immediately access is there. Bhakti is accessible. Without that association, it's very difficult to understand what is bhakti. So Lord Chaitanya is so kind that he made the first move. Krishna said, first you surrender, and then I'll deliver you from sinful reactions. But Lord Chaitanya made the first move. He said, here. No qualification. No previous qualification. There was no sukriti from previous births going back. How many? No qualification. What's our qualification? Fallen. Patita pavana. What's our qualification? That's our qualification. We're fallen. So Lord Chaitanya made the first move. Here. Take. Einechio shari maya nashi baralagi harinam mahamantra lao tumi magi. I've come to give you the medicine, holy name. Take it. This is the medicine. This will cure you from all the diseases. He knows we're sick. Prabhupada says it's like the Ayurvedic physician. He knows simply by taking pills. He understands the disease. So by the mere fact that we have physical body, material body, he knows. Takes pulse? Yes. Here's the medicine. Take your medicine. That's all. Take the medicine. Take this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Make your life successful. That is all. He made the first move and didn't discriminate. He didn't see who was fit and who was not fit. Didn't discriminate. Who was qualified, who was not qualified. Who was advanced, who was not advanced. Irrelevant. He broke open the storehouse and freely distributed. Take. He made the first move. And those who are servants of Lord Chaitanya, they also, following in his footsteps, they freely distribute. They make them first move. They give, here, please take. Bhakti becomes accessible. Although previously very difficult to understand and even to approach, one could speculate for millions of years and never understand it. Brahmabhuta prasanatmana sochiti nakankriti. One would have to come to the Brahmabhuta platform in order to begin his devotional service. But Lord Chaitanya is so kind. Here, begin. That's all. Take. And the devotee, he's on behalf of the Lord, he says, here, take this Hare Krishna mantra. Chant. Make your life successful. Become happy. This is, of course, a great fortune that all of us have by having come in contact with Srila Prabhupada. And of course, if someone as potent and powerful and as exemplary as he is, teaches by example, then certainly there are many who will learn from that example. Otherwise, what does it mean to teach by example if nobody learns? But he came to teach by his example. And by that example, those who remember that example, those who heard, they have learned. And on behalf of him, they teach. And therefore, bhakti still becomes accessible for those who have no previous qualification. But of course, Srila Prabhupada also always reminded us what is the goal of bhakti. And therefore, we always have to emphasize this point that, yes, having once come in contact with bhakti, with devotional service, then it's the beginning. Satam prasanga mama virya sambado bhavanti hritkana rasayana kata. Touch Joshanad Ashva Pavargavartmani Shradharati Bhakti Nukumishyati. Then in the association of devotees, discussions of the pastimes and activities of Krishna are very attractive. They enter into the ear and they go to the heart. And as one goes on hearing these topics, then Shradharati Bhakti Nukumishyati. Touch Joshanad Ashva Pavarga, the path. As one goes on, follows this path, hearing, then gradually he becomes detached from this world, and his attachment to Krishna gradually becomes fixed. And then real devotion and devotional service begins. That's when devotional service begins. Simply by hearing. By hearing. That is the method. Method that Lord Chaitanya came to distribute. Message that Srila Prabhupada, by his example, came to distribute. And that is the message that he wants all of us to take into our hearts, to embrace, and to share with each other. Machchita magata prana bodhiyakta parasparam katyantaschamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. Krishna says, the thoughts of my devotees dwell in me. Their lives are surrendered unto me. And they derive great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another. and conversing about me. I didn't read the introduction, but I talked about it. I talked about it. These things are there very clearly. Prabhupada talks about it everywhere, not only in the introduction, but every page of Bhagavad Gita. He makes the emphasis. Sometimes people think that Prabhupada has a prejudice because everywhere you look in Bhagavad Gita, it's always bhakti. You think, well, that's not what Krishna is saying, but actually that's what Krishna is saying. Prabhupada has realized the conclusion already of the whole Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, on every page, he's teaching others, convincing others of the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. And he doesn't allow us to settle for anything less than the conclusion. That is how he makes bhakti accessible. And that's the very first thing he says in the introduction. I'll read the first paragraph of the introduction. He says, Bhagavad Gita is also known as Gita Upanishad. It is the essence of Vedic knowledge and one of the most important Upanishads in Vedic literature. Of course, there are many commentaries in English on the Bhagavad Gita, and one may question the necessity for another one. This present edition can be explained in the following way. Recently, an American lady asked me to recommend an English translation of Bhagavad Gita. Of course, in America, there are so many editions of Bhagavad Gita available in English. But as far as I have seen, not only in America, but also in India, none of them can be strictly said to be authoritative, because in almost every one of them, the commentator has expressed his own opinions without touching the spirit of Bhagavad Gita as it is. The spirit of Bhagavad Gita is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita itself. It is just like this. If we want to take a particular medicine, then we have to follow the directions written on the label. We cannot take the medicine according to our own whim or the direction of a friend. It must be taken according to the directions on the label or the directions given by a physician. Similarly, Bhagavad Gita should be taken or accepted as it is directed by the speaker himself. The speaker of Bhagavad Gita is Lord Sri Krishna. He's mentioned on every page of Bhagavad Gita as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. So, Prabhupada says, people ask me, what is the reason? Why should there be another translation? Because Prabhupada, in every page, he's given us the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. He's understood. He's understood the message, realized the conclusion, and that's it's given the criteria of what is actually one of the responsibilities of the Acharya, is that he's realized the conclusions and he's able to convince others of those same conclusions. So why should he give something that will cause us to settle for something less? He shouldn't. And he doesn't. So Prabhupada has made bhakti accessible for us. And difficulty is many of us don't read his books enough. My humble appeal for all of you who have these books in your home, don't just dust them off. Don't just dust them off. Don't just keep them on the shelf for others to see, oh, he has a set of books. These books are too valuable. I remember one time when I was distributing books, I went up to somebody and I said, I showed them one of Prabhupada's books and I said, and the person said, well, what is that? I said, oh, this is one of the books of my spiritual master. And she said, how much is it? And then I just kind of hesitated for a second. I said, well, actually, I'm sorry, they're too valuable. I don't think you could pay how much these are worth. And I started to walk away. Hey, wait a minute. You don't have enough money. They're too valuable. What do you mean I don't have enough? No, I'm sorry. You couldn't possibly have enough money. These things are invaluable. These books are invaluable. Well, how much is it? I don't think you have it. Sorry. Well, $20 do? Okay. Too valuable. Too valuable to keep on the shelf. We should be reading them. He came to give us this treasure house of devotional service. Don't miss out. Don't let this life pass by without diving deep. Don't stay on the surface. If you stay on the surface, all you'll get is fish. But if you go deep in the ocean, there's so many jewels ready to be mined. Go deep. And Prabhupada is taking us there on a journey. Deep. How to understand who is Krishna. I think I've talked long enough. Thank you for your attention, for coming and celebrating the New Year with us. And maybe if I can encourage you in some way to make a resolution. Here it is. Please make a resolution to read Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is from cover to cover. If you haven't done it yet, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam 7th canto, he says, Shrinvan Bhagavato Vikshnam, was it? He says one should always hear about the topics of Krishna. In the commentary he says, one should not think though, oh, I have read this book once. He says these books are meant to be read again and again and again and again and again. So, in fact, that's why I was starting this morning in the introduction. I was starting again this morning. Going back to the beginning and starting again. So, please, for those who have not read, read. For those who have read, read again. Hare Krishna, glories to Srila. So, what's the schedule? Artik's at 7. Any questions? No. Yes.
Thinking about, speaking for myself, and I imagine many people in this room are, they're in family life, and we have so many material desires. But at the same time, we have some different degrees, some degree or another, of desire for bhakti, for devotional service. So how do we pursue bhakti knowing that we have material desires at the same time? Can you say something about that?
Yes. Shinvatasva kata Krishna punya shavana kirtana hridanchisto hayabadani vidonoti surit satam. Bhagavatam states that Shri Krishna, who is the super soul in the heart of living beings, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment within the heart of those persons who develop the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Prabhupada explains in the Upadashamrita that bhakti is the cultivation of desire. There may be so many desires that are there within the heart that will lead us astray from bhakti if we contemplate them, meditate on them. But this verse from the Bhagavatam that we quoted states that when one develops the urge to hear the topics about Krishna, then Krishna acts from within the heart. He takes it, because usually what we're in anxiety about is the desires. It's usually I have all these desires and they're distractions. I can't fix my mind on bhakti. And sometimes when we begin to hear about the glories of pure devotional service, then we start thinking, whoa, wait a minute here. I've got all these desires. And if I hear Krishna's pastimes and the glories of pure devotional service, then I come to the understanding that Krishna wants me to get rid of these desires. And I'm not ready for that yet. And therefore, we start thinking that, well, maybe I better not hear. Or sometimes we give the example, sometimes we think that if I hear attentively, and if Krishna is taking away these desires from within the heart, then I have to be careful, and I have to make sure I protect those desires in the heart, because if Krishna is going to take them away, he may take them away when I'm not looking. So better I don't hear, because if I hear, he says he's going to take them away. So better I don't hear. And therefore we lose. Bhogashvaya prasaktanam taya prahachatetasam. Krishna says in the minds of those who are too much attached, sense, enjoying material opulence, and bewildered by things, there can be no resolute determination for devotional service. There can be no resolute determination for hearing. So, how to deal with these desires is basically we have to understand them as impediments, obstacles on the path of devotional service that can't be given up by our own efforts alone, and neither should we worry about giving them up. We should let Krishna do his work, and Krishna will do his work on those who sincerely go on hearing about him. And in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a verse spoken by Krishna to Uddhava. He says, having awakened faith in hearing the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with sense gratification, knowing that all sense gratification leads to suffering, but still being unable to give it up. Now, try to understand that. He's disgusted, knows it leads to suffering, still can't give it up. But he's awakened faith in hearing about it. So Krishna says, my devotee, he should remain happy and go on serving with me with faith and devotion. Because even though my devotee, he may fall down, he may slip, he may engage in some sense, he may see that I have this desire and he falls. Because he's awakened faith in Krishna consciousness. He's awakened faith in hearing about Krishna. Then when the devotee falls in that position, he sincerely repents within his heart. So that's a result of going on and hearing about Krishna. In fact, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, this verse in the Bhagavatam is the beginning of bhakti. He has enough faith simply to go on hearing. That's all. That's all required. Krishna will do the rest. So, therefore, when we neglect hearing, when we neglect chanting, what happens? We become overwhelmed by our desires. And then we begin to think that I can't overcome them by my own efforts alone. And then sometimes we lose our attraction, and we lose our taste for hearing and chanting. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gives also an analogy and an example for a devotee who previously had a taste but lost it. He says it's like a person who gets a high fever. When a person gets a high fever, he suffers. Very high fever. Definitely he suffers. Not only does he suffer, but he can't eat. He says, therefore, he has to wait for the fever to come down a little bit. And when it comes down a little bit, he has to take sick man's food. Food that nourishes him, and the proper medicine. And by taking the sick man's food, which is a bland, usually a very bland, simple diet, he can't feast on the whole, as the analogy goes, on chanting all day long and hearing about Krishna all day long and chanting about Krishna all day long, or even hearing attentively in Srimad Bhagavatam. He can't feast. He's sick. He's sick, he has no taste. Just like a person sees a feast when he's high fever, no taste, I can't eat that. So he has to wait for fever. He suffers though. He suffers. So he suffers, and he realizes, why am I suffering? Because I'm sick. So when the fever comes down a little bit, he takes that which is most nourishing. Takes sick man's food, takes some medicine, he gets his strength back again, and fever gradually comes all the way down, and then he can feast again. He has some taste. He can go back and eat pizza and ice cream instead of eating bland, simple, nourishing diet, small quantity, just enough to get some strength. And then the fever comes down. So in the same way, we may not be able to fully relish the holy name, pastimes, and activities of the Supreme Personality of God are all transcendently sweet, just like sugar. For one who's been afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, cannot taste anything sweet. But it's very wonderful that if one very carefully goes on chanting these names every day, carefully, just every day, just carefully, attentively, hear and chant, then what happens? A natural relish begins to awaken in the tongue and the disease becomes destroyed at the root. The jaundice becomes destroyed. Although sugar is sweet, for one with jaundice it tastes very bitter. But it's the medicine. So if we just go on taking the medicine, then gradually the jaundice goes away. We become healed, and sweetness of the real sweetness of the sugar is experienced. Hearing is no other way. For one who has these desires, go on hearing. That's all. Just go on hearing. And if one neglects that, the nature of this world is forget. We will forget. And when we forget, it becomes very difficult to get back on track again. So, that's how to deal with desires. That Krishna will help. He'll do the work if we simply associate with him through hearing. What is that verse? Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Punishado Nityamukto Binatva Nama Namano. That the holy name of the Lord of Krishna is transcendently blissful and bestows all spiritual benedictions because it is Krishna himself, the reservoir of pleasure. It is not a material name under any circumstance, and it is no less powerful than Krishna himself. Right? It is never conditioned by the laws of material nature. This is because Krishna and his name, they are non-different. So one associates with Krishna and his name, as good as associate. Kali Kali Nama Rupa Krishna Avatar Nama Hoite Hoisava Jagat Nistiraha. In the age of Kali, the Lord appears in the form of his name, and anyone who associates it by his name, or associates with his name, he is good as associating with Krishna himself. And certainly he becomes delivered. Again, this is how the Lord makes himself accessible. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benedictions to the living beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names you invested all your transcendental potencies. No hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O Lord, out of your kindness you have made yourself so easily approachable by your names. I'm so unfortunate that I'm still afflicted by the jaundice of avidya and I have no attachment. So, there's no other way. Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalava, Nastyeva, 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 Gatiranyata. There's no other way. There's no other way. There's no other way. Three times repeated for emphasis. Prabhupada says in the commentary, he says, when you want to make a point, sometimes you have to say, stop it, stop it, stop it. 3 times. Nastyeva, Nastyeva, Nastyeva. Harinam, 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 Eva Kiram. Alright, I think Artika is going to begin in 1 minute. And we'll chant, and then I think there's some prasadam for the gratification of our tongue. Hare Krishna prasadam. This is real sense gratification. Don't be shy. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.